How's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 233, and I had a conversation with Dr. Jack Brown. He's an expert in body language and emotional intelligence, and he's also a physician. And for some of you, he may sound familiar. You may already follow him on Twitter, where he breaks down the body language information from videos of the debates and news conferences and things like that. Really fascinating stuff. During this conversation, we recorded some of the video. He's describing a couple of hand gestures and body language things. And so I'm going to put a little blurb from that on my YouTube channel at Official Susan Ruth. So youtube.com/Official Susan Ruth to check that out. It's just going to be just a tiny little bit. But speaking of YouTube, for so many episodes, I've been promising that hypnotherapy video, and Rachel Kais has edited it, and it looks amazing. She took my cartoons that I drew from the hypnotherapy session and incorporated them into the video. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned that the experience was about an hour and a half long, but Rachel managed to get it down to about 6 minutes just for a nice informational, and I'm narrating it. So it's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in that, also go check out the YouTube channel at Official Susan Ruth. I want to mention a podcast that I have discovered that I like and that I think you would like too, because it's along the same lines as this one. It's called Bloom with Chelsea Rose, so definitely check that out. I am going to be at the Seattle Film Summit, and by at, I mean in, and by in, I mean on Zoom. So the SeattleFilmSummit.com. It's going to start on the 2nd. It runs through the 22nd of November, and it's all about film, and that means directors, producers, actors, financiers, people in finance. How about that? I'll say it that way. The money people, the art direction people, the cinematographers, the behind the scenes, all the things. It's going to be a really fun experience. I hope you check it out. When you get your ticket, it'll be good for all of the different panels. I myself am moderating a panel that includes filmmaker, producer, writer, director John Penny, who's actually been on this show, filmmaker, producer, writer Christopher J. Moore, screenwriter, producer Jessica Walter, who also happens to be my lovely roommate, screenwriter, producer Russ Woody, who's also an Emmy winner, and cinematographer Charles Pappert, who is on a million different projects. Key and Peele, Black Lady Sketch Comedy Show, Crank Yankers, so much stuff. Lots and lots and lots and lots of information. General admission is only $100. Student tickets are $75. And those who have been hit hardest by the pandemic can apply for a special discount. So again, that is at SeattleFilmSummit.com, where you can register. My panel, Finding Your Voice as a Creator, will be Sunday, November 15th from 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I hope to see you there. I believe it's going to be one of the situations where I moderate the panel, and then we'll be able to take your questions and that kind of thing, which is very exciting. I wanted to mention that I'm going to be recording the preambles to the next 3 or 4 episodes in the next couple of days. I'm going to be going on a vacation and to visit some family in Seattle, and who knows what's going to be happening in the world over the next 3 weeks. But my preambles, everything will be set, and the episodes will be in queue. And so if something nutty happens, I won't be able to talk about it. Please don't think that I don't care if you don't hear me talk about it. It's just that at the time I recorded them, I didn't know. Let's hope everything goes well. I know the election is just in a few days, which is bonkers. Time is flying. Here we are. Other news, social media, Hey Human Podcast is on Instagram and Facebook. And my personal social media, Susan Ruthism, is on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. You can check out my music and art and acting information and things at susanruth.com. You can find me and my albums on iTunes. I've got 4 records up there on iTunes. You just search Susan Ruth and you will find me. And of course, go to heyhumanpodcast.com where you'll find a links page with information about every episode and every guest I've had on the show. I curate that very carefully, and everything from ways to reach my guests, to find their social media and that kind of thing, to books we talk about or articles or whatnot. So there's also a store where you can get Hey Human merchandise. It's an ad-free podcast, so it really helps support the show, and some really fun stuff I've designed for the merch. So definitely check that out. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. For sure on iTunes, it really helps to get those reviews because it pushes it up through the algorithm. So definitely do that. Take a few minutes and let me know what you think of the show. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. There are so many podcasts, and I'm really glad that you picked this one to take a listen to. There's some really fun episodes coming up. I put a bunch in the queue in preparation for me taking a little time off, and this will be an interesting couple weeks. Take care of each other. Be kind. Thanks again for listening. Here we go. Dr. Jack Brown, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. You have your career is very interesting to me. So you are, I want to make sure I get this right, behavioral intelligence and body language expert.
Yes.
Yeah. How does were you one of those kids that always could tell when your friends were lying kind of person, or what brought you into that?
Well, so I'm a physician, and I'm only one of 2 physicians in North America who's also a body language expert. But I've been studying body language longer than I have medicine. When I was about 11 years old, I grew up in a great family, great parents, but there was another adult I looked up to. He ended up fooling a lot of kids and a lot of adults, but he ended up not being a good person. So he fooled me, again, along with a lot of other people. And I felt like I really beat myself up. I should have seen that this guy wasn't sincere, that he wasn't a good guy. So I went to my parents. I said, how do you tell a good person from a bad person? And they gave me an okay answer. My parents have good interpersonal skill, but I wasn't satisfied. And so I started reading I started reading psych journals from a college library when I was in middle school. So I used to get in trouble for, your son's not paying attention. He's reading this stuff, And so I started actually studying psychology and behavioral science and body language when I was in middle school. So I've been actually studying longer than I have conventional medicine. So. Yeah.
Oh, it's really fascinating. I imagine, too, that once you have those skills down, even at an intermediate level, the world changes completely in front of you.
It's a watershed type of skill. And when you think about it, it's accessible to everyone. Everyone can learn it. And we often know it better than we think we do, and we suppress it. We suppress instincts. When you hit your teenage years, you get good at suppressing instincts, and you don't listen to your inner voice as much. I mean, now some people, obviously all people do to a degree, but some of us suppress that more, and it all depends on the situation, all depends on the source. But yeah, you can certainly, no matter what age you are, you can hone that skill. And it's fascinating. Imagine if say 99.7%, so that's about 299 out of 300 people, were deaf. Couldn't hear anything, and you could hear, and you invented this little invention or this pill that costs 10 cents, and you can make everyone hear. Who wouldn't take advantage of that? Everyone would take advantage of that. That's the degree to which I feel that body language affords one's. Of course, it's not an extra sense, although sometimes it feels like it, but it enhances your other senses, and it enhances your communication dramatically. So it's kind of like once you take the red pill, it's like you can't look back, and it's fascinating. Whether you're trying to avoid mistaking your love life, maybe you dated a sociopath and or a narcissist, and you don't want, and at first you were fooled, like a lot of us are, or maybe the same kind of person, only it's a boss, or maybe it's an employee, or et cetera, maybe someone you voted for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you love someone and or you put a lot of time and energy into or money into a relationship, any one of those things, you invest a lot of yourself into it. We tend to not see things that are right in front of us. We tend to see what we want to see. And so we aren't objective. The opposite is also true. Say, pick someone you can't stand, and you might artificially criticize them more about certain things, or see things, bad things, and maybe they're really bad anyway, but you see things that aren't there because you're artificially criticizing them. Body language is an objectivity tool. As human beings, we're inherently biased. We don't see things in an objective sense. So it's an objectivity tool, and you want to see things as they are, not as you want them to be, if you're, trying to operate in the real world.
Well, it brings up an interesting point. So for you, you do as you're reading people, but I'm sure many of the people you're reading, you would not sit down to coffee with, and some you might even abhor. How do you get out of your own way in those instances? Are there such rote mannerisms that across the board that people have that supersede biases? Or
when body language is classically taught in a real strict sense, you say, okay, this body language goes along with this thought feeling. And I say thought feeling, kind of like the thoughts and emotions, or kind of, I kind of amalgamate that into one. So this particular body language on the face or on the rest of the body goes along with one thought feeling or one thought emotion. And this one goes along with another. Yes, and you learn to read in a cluster. You look and you see not just one thing, but 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 even, almost simultaneously, or maybe a few seconds before and a few seconds after, like a sentence. A sentence takes a little while to speak or to read. So body language is like that too. It's not necessarily instantaneous, but a lot of it is instantaneous, or just a few seconds before, a few seconds after. You say, what does that say? So you're reading that person in that moment, in that context, in that moment. So you could have a real honest person that's telling a lie. And then if you don't see the gestalt, you say, oh, that person's a liar. I don't want to date him, or I don't want to date her, or I don't want to be hired by him, or I don't want to hire her, etc. You might say all that, but so that's telling you in the moment. There are patterns to look for that tell you the overall, the gestalt. What is this person's overall personality footprint? Do they have a footprint of a sociopath? So you can see an honest person that's pretty honest when they're lying, and maybe make a false judgment. But you also, what's a liar look like when they are not lying in this moment, but they're an overall really pathological liar, but they're not telling a lie in this moment. So how do you spot that? That's a fascinating thing. And so if you look for insincerity tells, so people who are chronically dishonest will have those insincerity tells even when they're not lying in this moment. Now, not always, but very often. So you know what to look for. So you can kind of tell either. But you want to be, when you have a small sample size, when you just see one image, like a posed image. Someone sent me a picture of Amy Coney Barrett and Donald Trump and Amy Coney Barrett's family, along with the first lady in the White House, taken 3 weeks ago or so. And it was a posed picture. So you want to be maybe a little bit cautious about interpreting posed pictures, but impromptu pictures are a lot more valuable in terms of what is actually going on there. And even more valuable, of course, are video material, and of course, real life, when there's no video, but you're there, sitting there or standing there watching someone.
What about people? What was it? I know that this is falsely attributed to, I think, to Goebbels, but I don't think he actually said it. I think it's just over time it's been given to him about if you tell a little bit of a truth in the middle of a lie, they'll believe it because you've given a seed of truth.
That's definitely a truism. So I work with, so one group of clientele I work with sometimes are office holders that are already holding office. I'm real select about the people that I work with are running for office or running for re-election, maybe, or running for the first time. But office holders, say you're a mayor or a governor or a senator, there's a lot of people coming to your office wanting favors, wanting you to support legislation, and they're telling you 98% truth with a little bit of lie in there. Yeah, that's a real common technique. And in fact, Junior, when Junior steals the cookie, the last cookie out of the cookie jar, Junior's kind of maybe telling that, doing that too. And it's a very, you know, it's camouflage, you know, or when the 16-year-old buys, you know, condoms, and he puts on a pack of gum and a soda pop and, you know, 3 other things on the counter. He is trying to camouflage what, you know, people do that all the time. It's a really common lie technique. And, you want to be able to spot the nonverbals that go along with that. And of course, lying isn't the only thing where that body language tells you. Sincerity, again, is greater footprint. What about affection? You know, are there... so people can fake lust things, you know, does this person really love me? Or are they in love with me? Or maybe this person's trying to date me because they think my dad has money or I have money. They go after power, or maybe they're really dangerous. So there's a threat assessment. You know, threat assessment is typically given for, you know, physical danger, which of course is important. And by the way, always trust your instincts. When it comes to physical danger, the possibility of physical danger, always trust your instincts. You should learn to trust your instincts with everything, even if there's not a physical danger component, but particularly when there's physical danger, always trust your instincts, and learn to differentiate my instincts from my anxieties. And sometimes that's difficult. I have some of my clients keep an instinct journal, like, you know, even little things like, did I pick the right movie, or did I pick the right restaurant, or did I pick the right date, or did I pick the right job, or the fastest line in the grocery store? You know, and you want to hone your instincts, listen to your instincts. You really want to pay attention to that.
Well, everybody lies at some point. That's right. It's just about the kind of lying. And
again, it's not necessarily, as I say, there's a relationship and there's a drop off in affection. You know, is someone, when they're falling out of love with you, maybe they're not cheating, maybe they are, maybe they're not cheating, but you want to spot those kind of warning signs. Are they dropping off in their affection, or at the beginning of the relationship, you know, do they just want, you know, are they just lustful? Do they just want a one-night stand? Or is, you know, what you want to be able to spot those, but also when you're selling something, you know, if you're a salesperson, or if you're teaching something. You know, body language is really important if you're a teacher of anything, whether you're teaching kindergartners or if you're teaching college or university classes or adult ed. How the nonverbals you use. For example, if you use palm up gestures, your audience is going to retain. They're going to have a better long-term retention of the material. If you use palm down gestures, they're going to have less long-term retention of the material. You're also going to alienate people, even if they like you, if you use palm down gestures. You want to tend to use palm up gestures.
Is that just feel more positive so the brain reacts better? Is that with the palm up?
Yeah, it's more of an open, less, more. Now, it depends what the rest of the body is doing, of course. So you don't want to overgeneralize. You never want to go on one thing only. But yeah, in general, palm up gestures. So I'm going to lower my camera here. So Donald Trump always does this. He does palm up gestures good, but he keeps his upper arm close to his torso. You shouldn't do that. Particularly on a straight male, but also on females, regardless of your sexual orientation. You want to spread out a little bit from your torso. You want to show a little bit of confidence, and you don't want to flap like a wounded T-Rex with short arms, like Donald Trump does. He does this wounded T-Rex thing. You want to move your hands slower. Yeah, you want to do palms up, Donald, but you want to move your hands slower. This is confident. And you'll notice Barack does this a lot, Barack Obama. Barack Obama also does a basketball steeple real commonly. This is an alpha-beta hybrid. So this is not too alpha and not too beta. And if you use too many hyper-alpha gestures, like here's one that Donald Trump does all the time. He does this when he's sitting all the time. It's hyper-alpha. When I coach people, I say, if you're going to do this, you only want to do it maybe for a tenth of a second, maybe during the one syllable in the most important word in the most important sentence of the whole hour you're talking. You do this. It's literally that short, because it's kind of like a really strong spice in stew or soup. You know, a little bit is a little bit too much.
What is it about that makes it alpha? Is it
well, it's an alpha, and it's even a hyper alpha. It's just the way the brain reads it. It takes it as more of a dominant display. The fact when you're touching it, and you can have a lower steeple too. Like Donald Trump does this when he's sitting, but when he's sitting in an open chair, he does this. But when he's sitting at a desk, he might do this. Sometimes he does this. That's a real hyper alpha. You know what? To say why the brain interprets it that way, we don't always know the answer to why.
It feels very pokey. Maybe it's a pokey feeling, you know? That's my layman's idea. It's pokey.
It's really artificial. The only other time you really see that are news journalists when they're, doing the report. John, we're down here at the stadium. And, they're doing this.
It does feel artificial. I get that completely. That makes a lot of sense.
Now, palm down, that's alpha. We can explain that more. We have more of an explanation of why does that feel alpha. That's more of a throwing. I'm hiding something. I'm dominating you. I'm covering you. I might be hiding something, et cetera, like that. But in palms up, my hands are open. Real metaphorical. My hands are open. Handshakes. You can see I have nothing in my hand. I have nothing in your hand. Let's touch each other. Which you can talk a lot about handshakes if you want, but handshakes, people. Well, of course, for a year now almost, we haven't been doing handshakes. But back, in the before times. And hopefully in not too many months in the future, we'll start those handshakes again. But people always mess up handshakes.
Donald Trump one is he grabs and he pulls people in. I've noticed that when he goes to shake people's hands, it's like he forces them toward him. It feels very abrasive. And
yeah, so men that do that to other men, so he'll grab and he'll pull you in. Like that, yeah. Exactly what you're saying. And sometimes with shorter people, he'll pull them up. He'll pull them up even, like with Nancy Pelosi, the day he was inaugurated, there's a famous picture of that. He was pulling her in and up. So men that do that to other men are consistently. Now, we all might do that once in a while in a crowded room or when we're off balance or we're, not thinking or tired or something. You might mess up a handshake when you're not concentrating, you're tired or just not paying attention. But men who do that consistently to other men are always narcissistic or worse, always, if you do it consistently. Now, if men that do that to women are not only narcissistic, they're objectifying. That woman is just, I'm just using her. That's a really a strong warning sign that.
Absolutely.
That should send up red flags all over the place.
Well, when you were talking about the instinct thing, that to me, I feel like human beings pick up on a ton that they don't even realize they're picking up on. When you're saying, make sure you listen to your instincts, but then their brain goes, oh, no, it's okay. I'm just overreacting or whatever. But that initial tell. We
get really good at that. For example, so study has been done where they, this requires a lot of vetting, a lot of back work for this. So if you interview, if you have a bunch of men and you interview their background and all their former partners and their friends of their former partners and all this, is this man faithful? Or is he a cheater? And you try and establish that. And you get images or very short videos, like 5-second videos of a person. And you show them to women of all ages. Take a guess at what age that women are best at just seeing a picture or a short video of a man they've never met and say, is this man a cheater or is he faithful?
I would think young before they've had time to be they go through their own stuff. Either very old, they would know because they've been through stuff, or very young because they're unawares. Although kids, I feel like, have really good intuition about people. They do this thing. They do a lean. I've seen little kids do a weird lean. Even if there's no one there to protect them, no parent or whatever, I've watched.
Yeah, so 14 years old. Is the so that's old enough to be interested in dating and the opposite sex or interested in dating but they're young enough to have 1 foot in childhood And so that we, I tell people often, like, it's a meditative kind of practice, is channel your 95-year-old self. You should often have a conference with two other people. So the three of you, your 95-year-old self and your 8-year-old self, or maybe your 14-year-old self, and the three of you should get together and channel each other. It sounds kind of metaphysical and, touchy feely. I understand that. I'm a man of science, but what that does is it taps into your, it's a metaphorical, symbolic way of tapping into your instincts and giving your instincts permission to talk to you and to listen. Because we get so good at not listening to our instincts. Even very learned people. And in fact, a lot of times the learned people are best at suppressing their instincts, and formally learned people, but the people with less formal education are better at listening to their instincts. And that also holds with body language. People with a lot of formal education tend to be poorer at body language. People with less formal education, but they might be just as smarter. They just don't have formal education. They're typically better at reading people, but also at projecting their own body language in context. How do I act in this situation? If I want to build rapport with someone, a doctor of bedside manner is a great example of that. They're really learned, but let me ask most doctors, they think they have great bedside manner, but most of them are pretty poor. But they think they are. It's just like most cops think they're better at reading other people. And there's definitely absolutely police officers that are excellent at reading other people, but they're no better than the average guy in the street. Yes, there are definitely some police officers that are great at that, but a lot of cops aren't. But you'll never tell a cop that, just like you'll never tell the doctor that they have poor bedside manner. Attorneys are like that too. And people that are hyper alpha in their profession, they think they're really good at it, but they're often not. It's a fascinating thing, and it should be salespeople too. It should be a formalized in education in all those professions. If, for example, if police officers were like that, they'd be a lot better at de-escalation. There's a major improvement at de-escalation. If doctors were like that, they had better body language and better communication skills, they would be sued a lot less.
Well, I would think that a doctor who is more in touch with body language would actually be better at diagnosing. Absolutely.
And they would be able to tell, is this patient, they're not really believing what I'm telling them. This might be a bread and butter basic diagnosis. I'm absolutely positive this is what the diagnosis is from the patient, from the doctor's point of view. Patient is saying, I'm out of here, man, I'm not coming back. And so the doctor's got to be able to see that, talk the person through the anxieties when they, say get a diagnosis, or maybe when they're holding back on things. When they're holding back on symptoms and they're, doctors sensing for some reason they're holding back on symptoms, you got to be able to sense that. And one thing I tell physicians is you always have to have a scribe in the room to do data entry, whether it's an old-fashioned chart or the computer. Have them over there. You focus on the patient. You're going to get sued less. You're going to bond more with the patient. You're going to enjoy your day a heck of a lot more. You got to do that.
Yeah, well, I can tell that it excites you when you talk about it. You get very, if I was going to be reading you, I can tell that that's something that you're very passionate about, which I think in any instance, if something gives us passion, that is the thing we should be pursuing, obviously, if we're lucky.
Yeah, you should be able to have the wisdom enough to listen and have the courage enough to leap.
I'm curious about mirroring. I know that, especially with salespeople, I know that they're taught, if he touches his face, you should touch your face and all that kind of stuff. But I think that we naturally mirror each other as well, just as a weird sort of tribal connection, even with strangers.
When you have good rapport with someone and you're not thinking about it, you tend to mirror them. Or when you're attracted to someone. Even in a business sense, you might be attracted to them or have good rapport with them, and maybe you're not thinking of proceeding, in that direction too far. But if you have good rapport with someone, whether it's platonic or romantic or inclinations of romance, you're going to tend to mirror them. Now, in a pure sales sense, I caution salespeople of mirroring too close in time. Okay, so you do this, so I do this, and or too close in exactness of the body or the face, because it will be clearly read as a manipulative thing. People will catch on to it really quick. But the other thing is, if you don't know the basic body language to begin with, you often mirror negative things and not really realizing you're doing it. Of course, not a real, if someone makes an angry face, that's obvious. I'm not going to mirror that. But there's a lot of other moderate things that people might be mirroring. They don't realize they're really mirroring a negative. And so they're going to push the person away. So I, in general, caution people against that very much.
It's funny how some couples end up actually looking alike too. I always find that intriguing. And those tend to be really good couples, the ones that favor each other.
Yeah. It kind of goes to laughter. People, that's true too. Do you think like one person will think the other one's really funny, and it's just vice versa? And that's kind of overlaps in that same thing. But maybe we won't be laughing at them, but they think they're both laughing at each other. It shows a bonding. Well, yeah, that's a form of that. That's a form of that. In fact, laughter is really much more of a bonding, rapport building behavior than it is laughing. It is about reaction to something that's funny. It's a fascinating subject. Laughter is really fascinating. It's a bonding thing. But yeah, in a general sense, you're gonna mirror a bunch of other things too. Just the way people stand, the way they lean, even words. For example, if you use the word children and I use the word kids, I might choose to use your word children. They're somewhat synonymous. Although it's interesting, the word children tends to have more affection towards it than the word kids, a little less affection. But I should use your whatever your synonym is. Also, de-escalation. So you can kind of use it in a reverse sense. Say you're with someone that's really getting upset, and so their words are louder, and if you just talk quieter, so you're using the of course verbal. This is not nonverbal purely, but and you use calmer face and calmer body. They will de-escalate. So you just use calmer words and quieter words, but also de-escalate in your body. I've even had some clients where what they'll do is someone will be real confrontational with them, and then they'll just stand shoulder to shoulder with them. You can't get it's like funky kind of in your face. Almost, you can't. You don't want to do it all the time because sometimes it kind of gets people laughing too much / almost insulting. You can kind of do that too much. But if you just stand shoulder to shoulder with someone, they almost can't get mad at you. You could be at Sky Harbor International Airport in Phoenix, and the concourses are like a mile long. You can see someone from the other end of the airport, and you see two guys, their torsos are facing each other. And you can tell from before you see any detail, those guys are probably confrontational. You get close and you see that. So when you shake someone's hand or you first greet them, even if you've seen them 100 times, you want to your feet pointed right towards them, your hips, your shoulders, your head, and you want to greet them like this. Your eyes, and you can when you first meet someone again, or you first see them, even if you've seen them 100 times or 1,000 times before, you still want that eye contact. And it's one of those times where you can look a little bit longer, especially during a handshake, where any other times it might feel a little bit starish, like you're staring. But then after a few seconds, you don't want to keep your body pointing at them. You want to tilt very slightly and maybe put weight slightly more on one shoulder. I'm exaggerating here, but just a slight turn and a slight shift, and it relaxes the moment. You don't want to stay pointed right at them because it tends to heighten up the alphaness. You want to just slightly beta it down. Of course, you don't want to turn too much. You definitely don't want to do that because that shows them disrespect.
It's such a dance.
Yeah. But these are things we're doing to a large degree that we don't realize we do. But when you learn it, so most people have a fair amount of instinct to it, and most people do a fair amount of the time. But when you back learn it and bullet point it, and then you go back in, you say, oh man, I was messing up here. I was doing this wrong. If you think back to your first date when you're 15 or 16 or whatever, we all can think about
older.
One of the awkwardness of that was probably body language. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just being awkward. So if you have somebody say that is a true sociopath, let's say, I've read books about sociopathy, and they're learning how other people behave, and they're adapting, or maybe that's a psycho, you would know better than I, but they're adapting. Can you tell someone is, what's the word, like, pretending to be a certain way, or are there people that are really just so good at it that it's become something they've absorbed?
Well, it depends on your sample size. I mean, if you're just with them for a few seconds, it might be tough to tell. If you're just with them for a few seconds, it's usually tough. But if you're, I say sample size, I'm trying to sound like a statistician. But, if you are with them for more than a few moments, the more time you spend around them, the more accurate you'll be there. So, Robert Hare has a 20-point checklist for sociopathy, psychopathy. And the two most important things, and it's a real famous checklist, HARE for your listeners, is Robert Hare. And you'll see that list. The two most important things in that list are whether if the person, the most important thing on that list is empathy. Do they have empathy? And if you get good at detecting empathy, now some people will fake empathy, but it's a hard thing to fake, and especially for very long. They might say the right thing, but if you know the other behaviors to look for, again, a lot of that is body language. It's much more than just what someone is saying. So if I say, I'm sorry, but my face doesn't, or that's really sad that person died, but I don't have that face. You want to be really good at recognizing empathy. And the other thing is sincerity. Now, again, I use this word as a more Gestalt word for honesty. So if you're dishonest in a moment, you're telling a lie or the truth, in that moment, that's a lie or a truth. In a larger pattern, a meta pattern of thinking, the overall personality, that's sincerity. They tend to be mostly honest or chronic liars. That's what I mean by sincerity. I use that real specifically for that. So if you want to be around people that have high empathy, and you don't want to be around people with low empathy. You want to be around people with high sincerity, and you don't want to be around people who are chronic liars or have low sincerity. So it's really good. So just a quick and dirty way of telling a sociopath or psychopath are those. And so unless you're hiring a hitman, you don't want anyone with those bad qualities. And so, if you're at a workplace, and you're one of a whole bunch of employees, the guy 3 cubicles down might be a sociopath, but you want to be able to spot that and keep him at arm's length. You don't want to work on a project with him. You don't want to hang around with him at a company picnic, et cetera. You don't want to take a ride home with him, et cetera. But if, of course, other things, you don't want to date that person. You don't want to have them babysit or dog sit for you. You want to be good at spotting these people. You'll save, you maybe save your life, but at the very least, you'll save yourself a lot of time, money, and heartache and hassle and legal. I mean, all these, not all threat assessment is physical. Most sociopaths are not violent, but but they could be, and you don't want to be the first one on the list, and you don't have a list in front of you. So you don't know if that person's committed 100 atrocities or none before. You just want to be able to spot those personalities and stay away from them.
But what about the people that are like the Steve Jobs or the people that maybe even Albert Einstein that have behaviors that could be read that way? Then they move up in their professions or in what they're doing. Not necessarily great people, but they don't use it for evil. They use it for focus and.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if very many people think that Albert Einstein was a sociopath or psychopath. He probably was on the autism spectrum, which is very, very different. And he was difficult to work with,
Yeah. That's what I didn't mean to call Einstein a sociopath. Yeah. I meant that people found him, his lovers found him difficult. His wife found, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great story about him where I guess he didn't wear a tie to dinner, or his wife and him got invited to a dinner, and his wife wanted him to wear a tie or maybe it was an after, like he didn't wear a tie and he got scolded. I can't remember. And so he sent the tie to the people afterwards, and here's my tie. Would you just stare at it for 3 hours and then we'll call it even, something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, he's a fascinating guy to study just about his creativity. And that's obviously another kind of emotional intelligence. And one of the great tools that the creative person uses is they're great at disinhibition. So they selectively get good at disinhibiting the brain so that creativity can flow. It's a fascinating thing about Einstein. I could talk to you about creativity is another subject I love. And of course, it's a, how, not just in the arts, but in anything. That's a fascinating subject. If any of your listeners want to understand how if you want to be disinhibited with regards to creativity, of course, you can be disinhibited too much and do some really bad things in society, but you're drunk or high or something like that. Take a good improv class and you'll get, like a semester long, 4 hours a night for 15 weeks. Take a good improv class, and you'll get really good at disinhibiting. And boy, whatever you do, even if you work alone in a room and mainly just write, you'll really facilitate your creativity by that.
Yeah, you send the gatekeepers home. As I always say, improv allows you to send the gatekeepers home, the one that get in your way in your brain.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good way of saying it. Yeah, I probably, of all the classes I've ever taken in my life, and this is something adult ed that I took well after university. It's probably the most valuable class I think I ever took is improv.
Fun and terrifying.
Struck a load of classes, but
yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. Here's a question I've always wondered: when I am at a funeral, I get weirdly giggly and inappropriate. It's so inappropriate. I don't know why that is. And then in times when I'm supposed to be super happy, sometimes I'm the opposite. And it seems sad, or I get emotional and almost cry. I know other people that are like that because I've had conversations. What the hell is that about?
When you max out your emotions, sometimes you have kind of short circuits. When you're in situations like weddings or funerals, or something really, really good happens, and like people cry, and they just don't cry, they bawl. And if you just saw an image of them, a video of them, you would think, oh my gosh, someone just died, and maybe they just won the lottery, but they're,
yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah. So it's kind of a short circuit when you max out. So, in those really dramatic things, you have to sometimes take things with a grain of salt. So if we went to a funeral together, I would be like crying my eyes out, and you'd be laughing, and like people.
I do also cry. I would make that clear to everyone. I do cry at funerals, but I have been known to weird, and it's a weird thing where you can't stop. For me, I've experienced that where I remember very specifically, I went to my best friend in high school. Her stepfather died. It was terrible. I mean, it was terrible, obviously. And I remember being in the pew at the church, and something struck me, and I could not, I was shaking. I'm sure everyone thought I was crying, thank God, because I couldn't stop that weird laughter thing. Here's
a trick to do during those times. You can, of course, reach in your pocket and pinch the heck out of your thigh or something. But another thing to do is picture yourself in physical danger. Picture someone coming at you with a chainsaw, picture yourself in physical danger, and you'll get, you'll probably suppress that emotion.
That's good advice.
Whenever I have to have a colonoscopy and I have to drink a gallon of that stuff, that's the only way I will go down. I picture myself in physical danger, and then I can tolerate that awful, awful feeling. But if, in other situations, if you got to be a strong imagery, have a strong imagery of danger in front of you, and then, or an awful, awful scene that makes you sick in a film, play that in your head. Then maybe the giggles will stop. So that's something you can kind of do, steal that memory from a really sad scene in a film, or a really awful, scary scene in a film. because you already got the sad. You know?
Thankfully, that's only happened a couple times, but it has happened. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a crazy person.
Did your friend ever speak to you again?
Yeah, well, luckily she didn't know that was happening, but I felt really bad about it. But that was the first time that experience happened. And I think it's happened one or two more times since then in my lifetime. So I guess I'm still doing better than not, considering. But so what is emotional intelligence? She said, desperately trying to get off the topic of laughing at funerals.
The context in which I speak about emotional intelligence is primarily with body language. So there's all sorts of branches of emotional intelligence, but the context when I think of it and talk about it and write about it is primarily within body language. How do you act appropriately using your body in terms of communicating in that setting? So.
Okay.
There's lots of forms of intelligence, and the people. Emotional intelligence in general is one of the things that will govern how successful you are in life, whether it's in personal relationships or in business. Lots of times, the reason people get fired or advance in their career is their emotional intelligence, not necessarily their technical expertise or experience at a particular job. It's so. I'd encourage everyone to study that topic. That should be taught K through 12 and all through undergrad. That's if it'll make you happy in life and it will make you successful in your personal relationships and in your profession, boy, it's fascinating that we've ignored all those subtopics that fit in that category, and emotional intelligence is one of them.
So I don't know if you're single or dating or married or whatever, but in the course of your lifetime, once you've learned all this stuff and you went through the dating process, and that must weed people out pretty fast for you. That's got to be a nice bonus. And with friends who might.
It's nothing. It's something that. You don't necessarily plan on it, but it is a screening process that, if someone finds out what you do and then they say later, then you wonder what was it that person got creeped out about or was intimidated about. And that's probably a good thing that didn't proceed any further. People that aren't intimidated by it or freaked out about it, that's, a huge honesty tell there. And those people, are usually have very high sincerity quotients and empathy quotients because I'm not hiding anything. I never even passed in my brain, kind of a thing. So yeah, it's a funky, side benefit of it, but I didn't pursue it for that reason, but yeah.
I just say you're on the first date, you hand them an emotional IQ test. You're like, could you fill this out? Get back to me. What is it, Brett Myers-Briggs?
Well, the other way of looking at that is so like you tend to be attracted to people with very high empathy. And you want to be around people with high empathy. And if you detect a low empathy, you want to run from it. And you get very good at sensing that. But that's one reason I teach it, not just in the dating situation, but for all sorts of professional and all those in between situations. Yeah, if you detect low empathy, you don't want anything to do with that person.
But so many people are dating people like that. I feel like that. In fact, that I have a theory about. I think we talked about this when we talked on the phone when we were arranging for this conversation. Is that somebody like Donald Trump? I think, at least for me, I find him abhorrent, but I can see why there are people that are drawn to him because I think maybe he reminds them of relationships they've had or their dad or like weird, you know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, some people, okay. So if you're abused, say when you're young, whether it's whatever kind of abuse it is, there are some people that are drawn to those same kinds of personality, even though they may fully recognize that, I don't want to be near that person because they remind me of my father or whoever it was that abused them. But yet they often align with those people. And it's ironic in a lot of ways. But yeah, that is a tendency. So that might explain why some people are fascinated or drawn to Donald Trump. There's a whole bunch of reasons why people are attracted to him. And I'm actually want to write a paper, and I've solicited the help of psychologists and psychiatrists to say, okay, what are common denominators that we've seen in clinical practice / just with our patients and our customers, et cetera, that seem to orient these people to be Trump followers. Not Republicans, but Trump followers versus non-Trump followers. Probably one of the biggest is absolutely a low empathy. So if you have empathy for only people with your same skin color, or only your same religion, or only your same ethnicity / city, whatever, it depends on the category. That's not really empathy. That's a real truncated form of empathy, but it's really more of extended ego, because the only reason I'm feeling things for these other people are because they have this category of their personality or their behavior that is like mine. If you have empathy for people that don't look like you, don't pray like you, you'll never see the other side of the planet, et cetera, those people, you're very different than me. So that's a really a much more full form of empathy. That's true empathy. Again, the other one is really not full empathy. There's degrees to everything, but
more like tribalism.
Well, yeah, that definitely overlaps. The whole idea of tribalism overlaps. Another huge common denominator, I don't know one, I don't know one Trump follower who I would say is self-actualized. I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow's triangle. Highest is self-actualization. I don't know one. I think that might be the most common denominator. Now, empathy is in there too, but self-actualization might be easier to identify. Those Venn diagrams overlap, but it might be easier to identify. Does this person seem self-actualized? You can kind of maybe assess that easier than assessing empathy sometimes. I know those are two common areas. People tend to also look at the world the Trump followers tend to look at the world in false dichotomies. Black or white, left or right, good or bad. They don't see shades of gray. People that see shades of gray tend not to like Donald Trump. People that see things as black and white, and I'm not talking about the races, although, racial things, but although that is one of those categories. I'm talking more metaphorical when I'm saying black and white. But all those categories, whatever it is, they don't see the gray zones on any issue. They see things as either one of two extremes. It's called false dichotomy thinking, and false dichotomy worldview. They also tend to be drawn to Donald Trump. People that need a strong man are really tend to be drawn to Donald Trump.
Or people who want to be one. I feel like there are many people that look at him, who follow him, who want to be able to do the things that he gets away with doing, and, grab them by the pussy or be this outlandish person that seems to be able to get away with so much. I think that for example, when the thing about the taxes came out, I was like, oh God, they're going to love that, because they'll be like, yeah, I want to get away with, who doesn't want to get away with just paying $750 in taxes? Of course, but no one really is going to do that because it's not right. But he is sort of the epitome of, it doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong, I'm just going to do it. And I think there are people out there.
What else did you say about Mr. Zuckerberg?
He's a great example as well.
He's a lot like that too.
He's a trip though, because I feel that Trump's face says so much, whereas Zuckerberg's face he's got to be on the.
They're both sociopaths, but the one has a different. Zuckerberg has more of the mask. He seems like he's wearing a mask, a physiologic living mask.
It's creepy.
There's very little variation in his facial expression. Trump has hyper expressions of his facial expression, but he still has relatively little variation in another way of thinking. In other words, the things that he does, it's kind of similar to someone that doesn't have very much vocabulary. this is a limited vocabulary, but they shout the words, and and it seems like they have more variety because they're shouting a lot. And so body language wise, what's the analogy? He still has a relatively limited body language vocabulary in his body and in his face, but he does dramatic work and dramatic facial expressions, and particularly like say when he's talking. If you move his mouth and freeze frame the video, any given video, when he's saying a word, and you try and emulate that, you go, this extreme mouth expression that he has at this moment isn't necessary for the word he's saying, even at the volume that he's saying it. He exaggerates his facial expressions. And people that do that, that's a sign that they perceive themselves to be alpha. If they're talking to one person, or if they're talking to a room full of people, or if they're talking on TV, they perceive themselves to be alpha. People that hyper exaggerated facial expressions, but those same people, say something that it was not quite of, not all the way at the top of the food chain, like that's not a good metaphor, but they say you had, someone like Mr. Silver, the NBA commissioner. I've noticed him before when he's talking to NBA players. He does that. He does that hyper alpha facial expression. But I've seen him before talking before Congress, and he has a more of a normal facial expression because he's talking with people who are other alphas, and he doesn't perceive them to be subordinate to him. He perceives the basketball players to be subordinate.
Man,
yeah,
it is weird to see somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, how even when he's saying something that you can tell that to him it's something that he's feeling, I can't see it at all, really. Even the way he blinks is very strange. I mean, I don't want to shame anybody. It's strange to see that. Yeah,
he's not as good as he thinks he is, but he's definitely good at fooling most people. Yeah. Yeah, it's a funky feeling. You feel like you're seeing Jason,
With the mask, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, he's very, he's got, some people might say he's got a blunted affect. I think a lot of that is practice, though. In other words, if you saw him in private, he might have a lot more variation in his facial expression, but he puts on a good mask in certain situations.
I just watched, so actually on Twitter, when I watched your analysis of various videos that were posted, especially during the debates or Trump speaking or Amy speaking or any of that stuff, and I was like, oh, that's really, really interesting. And then I looked up interviews with murderers, basically, where they bring them in for the first time into the questioning room or interrogation room, and the detectives are asking. And after reading all these different tweets of yours, I'm like, oh my God, I see that. It's really wild. Once you start to see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah. There's a ton of those. I got to take those in small doses because they're hard to watch when you can stare into the abyss too much, and when you see those evil people. But yeah, there are absolutely a lot of signs. Who is that guy? He's serving a life sentence or several life sentences. About 10 years ago, he murdered his pregnant wife. I think it's Lacey Peterson.
Yeah. Peterson.
So here's a fascinating one that came out of it. So Lacey's mom was being interviewed. I don't remember her first name, but she was being interviewed after the fact. And one of the things that she revealed is that, and this is a super red flag, that it's if you ever hear this in a friend or a friend of a friend, you gotta warn him. He did not want to touch his pregnant wife's abdomen. He didn't want to feel the baby move. That's bizarre to me. As a father myself, that's such a bonding experience. That's just not bizarre to me. That's bizarre to everyone. If you hear that, at the very least, that father's going to be a crappy father if he hangs around. With a real high percentage, he's probably not going to hang around. He's probably going to split. He's going to want a divorce. He does not want to bond with that child. But it's even a greater warning sign because, there's potential violence there. that person. I would say there's a high index of suspicion that woman and the child could be in danger. So that actually has been reported in a number of different violent situations. It just was interesting that comes to, I was in an interview and it was a really high profile case, but yeah, that's a warning sign.
Do you think that's because they don't want to perceive it as a person, so they don't even acknowledge its existence? Yeah,
it's a dramatic distancing phenomenon. I don't acknowledge you as a person. I don't acknowledge you exist, that you're not mine. I don't want to hold you. I don't want to touch you. I don't want to bond with you. Stiff arming, in a way. I mean,
it's so against the natural urge.
Yeah, it hurts just to, it gets me nauseous just to talk about it. It's such a weird, odd thing for a father to do. So yeah, any women out there that if you hear this, hopefully you don't, but if you ever hear of it in a friend or a friend of a friend, that's a warning sign. It's a dramatic one. Yeah.
When there are children of narcissists present, it's really interesting. I noticed when I was younger, I dated people that my brother used to say, "Why do you date these guys?" And I say, "I don't know. I'm just trying to get that if you have a parent who is a narcissist, who's really all about themselves, that you seek out people that are like that until all of a sudden the aha button goes off and you go, oh, maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe I should seek out people that resemble the love of the good parent." But what are the chances that people get out of that rut,
Yeah, a lot of clients, a lot of people that approach me are either in relationships with a narcissist or a sociopath, or suspect they are. Often they are, or they've been through that and they don't want to make that mistake again. So, hey, I fell in love with a sociopath, or I'm in this relationship. I think this guy's a sociopath. And they want someone to validate that. And then, once an expert says, yeah, it sounds like that's I have a very high index of suspicion, or that absolutely is, get out of there. They want it. It makes sense if you're in a situation where you're not sure you want to leave, but you haven't been through this before. Yeah, you want to seek out someone who you want to be sure of something before you make a major life decision. Absolutely. But yeah, we all get fooled, and you want to be able to spot that. You want to be able to spot that behavior. And the key thing, the key thing is empathy. I mean, there's a lot of different behaviors, but that's the key thing. Narcissists have varying degrees of empathy. It's usually pretty darn low, but they can have some. Sociopaths are even lower, it's virtually non-existent, and the psychopath has none. That's a rough generalization, but most of the time, a sociopath has just little glimpses, and usually they're faking it. But a psychopath is none. So a sociopath is a product of the environment, and a psychopath is a more genetic. That's a person's born that way kind of a thing. But from a final common pathway, when you see a person in their 20s or 30s or 40s, et cetera, you won't necessarily know which one it is, and they could be just as bad. Either one of those categories you don't want to be around. So if they're a sociopath, maybe I'll give them a chance. You don't want that. Sociopath or psychopath, you want to stay those people, and a narcissist as well. That's one notch better, but still awful. You don't want to be around a narcissist.
And I think once you understand that, it makes it, I think you start seeing it quicker and quicker, which is great.
Yeah, that's what experience does. So all sociopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths.
Oh, interesting.
But they do overlap a good bit. But so all sociopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths. So it's one notch better, but it's still awful. Narcissists.
What are psychopaths very common, really?
Pretty rare. I say rare. They're pretty uncommon, but the psychopath sociopath fraction of the population is supposed to be about 4%, and the minority of those are psychopaths. But if you group those two together, antisocial personality disorder is a technical term for those collectively. But they need to come up with a different word, because that's just, it sounds kind of more mundane. Antisocial personality disorder. We need to have better nomenclature there. But So the word sociopath and psychopath are kind of a little more colloquial. But about 1 out of 25 people fit in that category.
That seems like so high to me. Jeez.
Some people think it in actuality, it's higher. And I am one of those people. I think it's higher than 1 out of 25 people. I hope I'm wrong. Now, since a sociopath is a product of the environment, that could flux. In other words, some decades you could have more sociopaths, some decades you could have a little bit less percentage. But that's fascinating, and it's hard to measure. It's hard to quantify, qualify. But yeah, that's the statistics that most experts will cite. About 4% are collectively in that group.
So I've been following you on Twitter for a couple months at least. I learned of you through another friend of mine who followed you. And so every time they liked one of your things, it would show up in my feed. And it's great. I really love it.
Thank you.
What made you start? I mean, I'm going to guess at what made you start responding to some of these like the debates and some of these news conferences and the town halls and all this kind of stuff. Were you doing that all along, or did something just finally go, oh my God, I can't take this anymore, I have to talk about it?
Prior to November 9th of 2016, so the day after the election, I commented on both Republicans and Democrats, and I was really politically neutral on all my sites. I'd pick on Democrats and I'd pick on Republicans. I would praise, different examples of each. And I was really trying to maintain a politically neutral stand. And, but I look at this as much more of a gestalt moment, a much more of a meta historical moment. It's not political. It's way beyond politics. So yeah, about 4 years ago, shy a couple weeks, about 4 years ago is when I started going, I said, F this. I'm just going in. I'm going in with knives. I'm going to be aggressive on this, and I'm not holding back. So yeah, that's when I did it. But so I'll analyze Donald Trump a lot and Mike Pence a lot in different situations like that. So I'll concentrate much more on political, but I'll definitely analyze people that are not in the political spectrum. When I teach people, lots of times I say, watch a talk show. Where you have even actors, when they're not being, when Daniel Day-Lewis is just he doesn't give too many interviews, rare, but when Daniel Day-Lewis is just being Daniel, he messes up some. Yeah, he's a great actor. Regardless of the skill level of the actor, when they're just being themselves and they don't have 19 takes, you'd be surprised at what you could see. Very skilled actors give away tells. And so why, that's kind of cool, because it says actors are professional liars in a way. But it's a social contract where you agree that, hey, dude, when you're acting, I want to believe you're Superman, or you're a spy, or you're whatever you're acting. I want to believe that. I want to be, I want my disbelief suspended. The suspension of disbelief is what's people refer to that phenomenon, and you want to believe that. And so yeah, you lie, and you're supposed to lie, and we're supposed to believe it. And yeah, it's an agreed upon thing. But if you know that actor in your private life, you don't want that guy to lie to you. Yeah, but when he's on screen, yeah, you want him to lie to you. So, but one thing this does, when you see them interviewed and they're just being themselves, even though they're quote unquote professional liars, again, within that context, we see that, wait a second, they have all the foibles that you and me have. In other words, so even though they're professional at it, they're pretty good, they may be able to fool us a little bit more, but not much, probably about the same with even the skilled actors. That shows you how ingrained it is in the human psyche. It's part of our brain. It's hardwired into us. It's our behavior. I
think that's why the actors who really are, who aren't acting, they've become the character, are so much more enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, method act. Yeah, it's, well, and I'll have people, pick like when you have to eke out a smile and you have to eke out a laughter and you don't feel like it. One technique is to pick a couple people that, that really do it for you. One guy that does it for me is Chris Rock. So I've watched a lot of his comedy, and I can just picture his name or hear his name, but picture his face. And, he's always got this half smile and he's and it makes me smile just hearing his name, or when I see an image of him in my mind, and I might call up certain videos. He's also got this one-sided kind of smile. And usually a smile that begins, often you want to be suspicious of asymmetrical facial expressions. There is some exceptions for smiling. So when you first go into a smile, sometimes it can begin asymmetrically and you go out of it, particularly laughter, because even more so out of context. If I'm trying not to laugh, I'm trying not to smile, like you were maybe in church that one time you cited.
Yeah.
You may be able to do it with one side of your mouth, but the other side of your mouth is kind of break it free and kind of laugh and smiling. So when he does that to his audience, he realizes, because he's a professional, and a lot of people realize this when they're real young, just intuitively when they make people laugh in grade school, that if I'm laughing, smiling, we talked about mirroring earlier, you're priming your audience. So like, I don't even know what you're talking about, dude, but like just looking at your face, it makes me mirror that face. And so your audience is primed. And so whatever you're saying next is going to be funnier. It's going to be 20 or 30% funnier, but also I'm just going to be tripping the laughter quicker. And so if you do that, picture whatever comedian works for you that really gets you just thinking of their image in your head or what you've watched a lot of, pick that person that works for you and you'll be able to recall that, and that will, pull up that smile. Another thing is when you have to smile, maybe in a more reserved way, but you don't want to break out necessarily laughter, although that certainly helps. Always, always, always smile with your eyes. You don't want to smile with your mouth first. You don't even want to smile with your mouth and your eyes at the same time. So begin smiling with your eyes, and your mouth will follow. The caveat that I would put there is don't think about doing the cheese thing at all. Just pull your jaw backwards. So anyone that's listening to this, like, smile with your eyes, and don't try and make a concave up, classic, stick man drawing of a smile. Pull your jaw backwards. By pulling your jaw backwards, once you've already smiled with your eyes, pull your jaw backwards, it'll go right into a smile. It almost feels like you're falling down. It feels so easy and natural. But even more basic than that, if you smile with your eyes and try not to smile with your mouth, you'll smile with your mouth. It'll just kind of come in. It'll kind of tease it into it. So think about that if you in situations when you have to smile, when it's difficult and you have to eke it out, in a certain situation, or even just for a picture. So your eyes are always partially closed during a sincere smile. Always, always, always. You see people smile and their eyes are wide open. That's not a sincere smile. That might be a sincere person, but just in that moment, that's not a sincere smile.
So interesting. Since we brought up acting, you had mentioned that you are getting into that realm. So I assume you're already coaching some people for acting, but
working with actors and some directors, and working on some screenplays. So it's really fascinating, beautiful stuff. I love it. It's fun. I have a bias as a body language guy. I think that most. I think a lot of directors should do more close-ups, and there's certainly directors that do a lot more close, than others. But it requires higher acting skill, and maybe a few more takes. Some people don't want close-ups of their face, but those are neat body language motion moments, and you end up projecting. If you're good, you end up projecting more. The audience will bond more with you as an actor, and more with the film. You'll drive home that emotional moment more. So I don't think there's enough close-ups. And so I bias myself in that direction. That's one of my, but yeah, all sorts of course, the rest of the body has body language too. It's not just the face. Pound for pound, the face has more than the rest of the body. And pound for pound, the eye has more than the face. So, if you want, if your audience is listening and they want to say, oh, geez, what if I forget everything you say? Think about what are their eyes? Do their eyes seem honest to you? Do their eyes seem like they love you? Do their eyes seem like they're no good?
It's always the eyes. It's always the eyes.
Trust their eyes. And, we can talk about eye contact, and we talk a whole bunch about different nuances of eye contact are important, but trust the eyes. I love the Hollywood thing. I love the film and TV. There's a lot of great actors that don't get credit, but there's a lot of average actors or not so good actors that for one reason, maybe they got lucky early in their career and they happen to be a hit movie with maybe a good director, but they're not that good of an actor. Or they, there's a lot of great directors that directed actors wrong in different scenes. Like, for example, like Roy Scheider's character, Sheriff Brody way back in Jaws in 1976, I think, 75. That scene where he was first shoveling the chum out and he saw the shark up close for the first time and he backed up. His face was not anywhere near accurate. It's not even close. It was another universe. That cigarette didn't even droop. He had a cigarette in his mouth. It just stayed straight. His eyes, his forehead didn't change at all. That's not the face that a person who sees a shark, let alone a 25 footer, up close would have. Now that scene after, I mean, there was some impactful things in that scene. I'm not trying to pick too much on Steven Spielberg, that was his breakout film. I mean, he's a great director, but that particular scene, he got a lot of the body language wrong, particularly on Roy Schneider's character. Roy Schneider was a great actor, but in that scene, that wasn't anywhere near accurate.
Who are some of your favorite actors as far as that craft?
Oh, I like it. Daniel Day-Lewis is fantastic. The lady who played C.J. Craig. Oh,
I love Allison Janney. She's the best.
She's a master. She blows me away. Yeah, that whole cast was fantastic. But she's like savant.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And by the way, I was at some of my friends came into town to do a show, and she was there and she was dancing and stuff. She is beautiful in real life. I know she always does the characters where she could be kind of funny or whatever. Not that CJ was obviously a beautiful woman, but in real life, stunner.
Yeah. I'd love to know her and I'd love to meet her and say
hyper smart. I think she's probably hyper.
I'd have to say if you ask me the actor that I saw that nailed the moment more than anyone most of the time, it would be her. But I have a lot of actors that I love. I mean, I could go down a long list, but everyone says Daniel Day-Lewis or I mean, heck, there's a ton of them, but those are my two female male that I cite.
By the way, the West Wing show that's going on right now, and that they did the stage play, the stage performance of an episode of West Wing. It's on HBO Max right now, and it's really, really, really good.
Which episode was it?
It's Hartsford Landing is the one they did, the voting one, where there's 20 some odd or 40 some odd people in this little town of Hartsford Landing, and they're all waiting up till midnight to. Yeah, and they did it as a stage play, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, there's a ton of those episodes. It's just, man, they nail it.
Oh, so good. Yeah, I love that show. It's excellent. That's really going off into the deep end. There is so the idea of method acting, we talked about.
You can just talk West Wing. I'll do a whole.
I know. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. When an actor. So I know that the brain works a particular way, and that, for example, the reason why we get excited and scared when we watch a scary movie is because the brain doesn't know that it's a movie. The brain is experiencing it as if we're experiencing the thing. So I'm always curious of actors who, let's say method actors. Daniel Day-Lewis is a great example because his extremes of characters, when he plays someone dark and twisty, is his brain sudden? Is there a point of no return?
So it might be apocryphal, but Jack Nicholson warned. I'm blanking again. I'm leaning my tired brain and my non-ability to recall actors when I'm in an interview like this. The young Australian actor that died that played
Heath Ledger.
Yeah, Heath Ledger. I loved him.
Excellent actor.
Jack Nicholson supposedly warned Heath Ledger. He said, "Be careful. I know you're a method actor. This is a dark character. Be careful." So, of course, Heath Ledger died of drug overdose, but not in a classic sense because it was a multiple drug interaction. And no one of those necessarily would have killed him. But he had the interaction, the total toxic effect of all the drugs, regardless of interaction, is what killed him. And why did he have maybe some depression before that? Yeah, probably, maybe. But he was taking those maybe recreational or for depression. There was a lot of people. So he did that during the filming. And I think the last scene wasn't able to, there were some scenes they had to modify or with that, or maybe it was the very end and they were able to do most of it anyway. But if you live in that dark area, that dark psyche of you're trying to emulate that that awful person, yeah. So did it make him more depressed? Was it more difficult to carry the weight of that? Yeah. And the other thing is like what I cited earlier. Think of if you need to step it up in your life at a certain scene and be brave or whatever. I've coached a number of different attorneys that confess that there was 2 scenes, particularly My Cousin Vinny.
That's a great movie.
Where the guy was not really an attorney, even in the film. He was faking he was an attorney, but he really wasn't an attorney. They say that inspired them to go to law school. So, I mean, you can pick different scenes in different films that are really inspirational that, to go to law school. That's a big decision, but that's just a fascinating side story. But you can pick different scenes. Like what scene really makes you feel confident when you really need to step it up? There's one, so A Star Is Born, the more recent one with
Bradley and Gaga.
Yeah, with Lady Gaga she's backstage and then he surprises her, "Hey, I'm going to sing this song. I want you to come out." She goes, "Oh, no." She gets all afraid. And then there's that moment where she gets this really determined look in her face and really determined look in her eyes, says, "F it, man. I'm doing this. And she gets that's my favorite moment of the film because his body language bias, where I see, okay, she's diving in, a lot like the song that she just sang is kind of the theme of the song that she went on to sing at that moment. But yeah, that determined look. So, you might, if you feel that moment, if you feel that strongly about that moment of the film, or you want to watch that might be something that I would call up, or someone else might call up at a moment when they need to just take the leap and do something really courageous when they're feeling trepidation or fear. There's all different scenes in movies that really inspire us. And when we watch those scenes over and over and over, we might put a different scene on, or like at the end of Dead Poets Society, when Ethan Hawke's character stands on his desk and says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." That's a scene where a young person or even an older person would say, he was going against all the peer pressure there and the authority, and he stood on his chair, and and then other guys stood on their chair too, but he had to be the first. So whenever I'm thinking of a peer pressure situation, I might draw up that. So there's that positive. You can use those scenes from film to recreate that emotion in yourself, because you don't realize it, but you're doing a little method acting when you watch that scene over. That's why you like watching that scene, because you get something from it. You recreate that character, that fictional character, at least parts of it, bits of it, in your head at that time. So later on, when you've seen that scene like a few dozen times, or maybe a few hundred times, if you really like the film, and you can recreate that in your head at those moments just on the fly when you need to recreate whatever that motion was. Go back to those scenes, and that will do the exact opposite of the bad thing with Heath Ledger and in the Depression, or Daniel Day-Lewis when he's playing There Will Be Blood. All the dark characters. And that guy,
you do kind of look like him a little bit. I see Daniel Day-Lewis in you a little bit too.
Well, thank you. Yeah, he's
not the crazy one.
Yeah. Hopefully, well, like when he was playing Lincoln, he.
Oh yeah.
He stayed in character the whole time. When he was off set, people had to dress him as Mr. Lincoln. He had that voice, it's so here's a story. When I was a sophomore in undergrad, I did this project where you had to pretend you were either a paraplegic and go around in a wheelchair, pretend you were blind and go around with either a leader dog or a blind stick. And there was one other one that I can't remember. And then, if you spoke another language, you could pretend you were a foreign student. And it was the first 2 weeks of class. And the object was to write a paper about how people would treat you different. When they perceived you to be, someone different than, how do they treat you different? If they think you're from Germany and you don't speak English, or that you're blind, how do they treat you different? And so it was an optional thing. You didn't have to do it. And I asked him, because my roommate was Australian and he taught me how to speak in Aussie. And we got to class like 2 weeks earlier. So before school started, he got me speaking Aussie pretty good, and I could speak Aussie pretty good. And I just kept on doing that. And when all the Aussies that I know, when I emulate them, I'm not maybe perfect. If there's someone from Sydney or Perth listening to me, I might not hit it right. But most Americans, I feel most Americans. But when I did that, I can't do a sad Aussie. So I can't do a sad Aussie. I only could do a happy Aussie. So I was not just emulating the accent. I was emulating the people who I knew in my life that were Australian, and they were just really, really happy people. So there was me doing method acting to try and get the Aussie accent down, but I also, without realizing it, was borrowing their positive affect, their joy. They were really joyful people. So I kind of backed in the side door and I said, wait a second, it's a way to get myself in a good mood. So, I can't do a sad Aussie. So it's a funny kind of story, but it really taught me that, we can use how you can really get yourself in a better mood. You can get yourself in a sour mood or a PTSD, if you rehearse the bad thing, you're making that wound over and over and over and over and over and over again. You're ripping the Band-Aid off the wound. If you re-rehearse a positive emotion, whether you went through it, but maybe even when you didn't go through, maybe it's a fictional character you're watching on a film that you've seen over and over again, you're re-rehearsing the opposite of that. So it's really PTSD. You're re-rehearsing the old wound, whatever the wound was, you're reliving it, and you're ingraining it. We can do the opposite. We can take a positive emotion and relive it, and your body and your face will emulate that.
Wow, that's a great idea.
Use that in the other direction. And of course, you don't have to have a film. You can rehearse things you've lived through that you experienced before. You just relive them over and over and over again. So it's the same phenomenon, but a different direction.
To that end, as we get ever closer to Election Day, and I think that for a lot of us, it feels very much like whatever current stress disorder instead of post-traumatic stress disorder. I think we're all in a very heightened feeling. Even the people who are, whether you're for the president or against him, I think everybody is at this heightened place. What do you see, both as a doctor and as a person who understands behavior and such? How do you see all of that de-escalating?
If you talk to psychologists or psychiatrists around the country, even in Canada or Australia or the UK, there's a lot. I'm blown away, humbled by the degree to which other countries are paying attention to our politics, and to the degree to which the average foreigner knows our politics. So it's not just for the United States, but it's for other countries. Let's say Joe wins. It'll still be ongoing. But if you talk to any psychiatrist or psychologist, they're just inundated with people really, really triggered. And it's not just that they're worried about the situation that's going on right now. Absolutely they are, and what's going to happen in the near future. But this guy and people that are behaving badly because of this guy are triggering past traumas that they may have had in their childhood. So if I was abused or someone was abused when they were a childhood or teen or something, or sometime earlier in their life, this guy and other people that are modeling their behavior after him are triggering these other people. So all this latent buried crap that's way back in our past is being resurfaced in addition to the present shit that's going on right now. So it's a really, psychologists and psychiatrists will really, and therapists, family therapists, school psychologists are all really we need to have double or triple the amount of those people. We needed that before anyway, but we really need it now. They're going to be busy for months and years to come. Yeah, in this universe where Joe and Kamala are going to win, and it's in the other universe where something else happens. I don't even want to go there, but yeah, that'll yeah. I'm tunneling to Canada.
They won't let us in. Yeah, you have to tunnel. The borders will be closed. Tell everyone how I could talk to you all freaking day, but tell everybody how to find you and all those good places.
Well, my website is Body Language EQ. That stands for emotional quotes. bodylanguageeq.com. And also on Twitter, if you just say Jack Brown, Body Language Twitter, I can give you my longer address there, but it's probably just, if you just do Jack Brown Body Language Twitter, you'll find me real easy. Yeah,
and I'll put links.
Either one of those, and they link back and forth, and
Yeah, highly, highly recommend the Twitter. For sure. It's fascinating. Like I was saying, I've done deep dives, not only to your Twitter, but because of that, going into other places, and it really does open up the world to some things. For better or for worse.
It does. It'll change. It's really a watershed skill. It'll change the way you look at everything. And you even get good at self-analysis. One thing is, okay, reading someone else's body language. Are they lying? Are they telling the truth? Do they love me? Do they not? Should I take this job? Etc. But also, how do I behave in context? Am I bonding? Am I building rapport? Am I sending out the signal I want to send out in the context I want to send it out in? But also, there's a third element of that, and that's kind of a form of biofeedback. So even if you're alone with yourself, driving or just working alone, even if your job is most of the time alone, you can use your own self-assessment in real time of your body to really, it's kind of a form of a biofeedback, both to calm yourself down, but also to be self-honest. We deceive ourselves a lot. So you can use it as a form of biofeedback, but also as kind of a, self-honesty technique. So it's a fascinating thing for your own self-improvement, regardless, even if you're around other people. But yeah, most people want it to be able to read other people or to increase their communication skill,
Yeah, and if you're aware of the feeling that's coming up in yourself, if suddenly you have a feeling, and then we're taught, don't have a feeling in front of people, so you maybe push it back down. But if you pay attention to that, and then you could say, okay, what is this feeling? I like to anthropomorphize my feelings when I'm having a reaction to something. I'm like, all right, where was the first time I felt that? Usually you can find a link to however you're feeling in the moment to something that happened generally when you're a kid, and sort of have a conversation with the younger version of yourself, so that this is probably way convoluted, but the now person that you are can let that old version of yourself know that they're safe and okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most people a lot of people have difficulty recalling those. And when did I first feel anxiety? When did I first feel loneliness? When did I first feel, and maybe someone's known loneliness their whole life, unfortunately. But that's a sign of a high emotional intelligence, someone that can recall those first moments when they felt certain things in their childhood. You don't bury things. People that bury different emotions would tend not to remember those times.
I feel like it's more, at least for me, I don't know if it's the very first experience of the experience, but it's more like the first time that I remember feeling like that, which may be when, you're 11 or 7 or not necessarily 3 or 4.
They really stick out in your mind. Yeah. It's
amazing any of us survive, honestly. Childhood can be real tough.
Well, children are brave. Children, when you think about the average elementary school student, they are all the time doing something for the first time. And we're saying, oh, don't worry about it. It was okay. I did that when I was your age. But the kid at the time is really, really has a high anxiety about that. You can think back. As adults, we get all like, oh, I'm an expert in this area and this is my job and I'm not going here. We get really good at insulating ourselves from new experience. As children, we did new experiences all the time. So yeah, to channel your younger self, that's a beautiful thing, and it'll make you a healthier adult.
Yeah, my dad always says, never do anything for the first time, which makes me laugh. Meaning, tell your brain like you've done it a million times before, that.
Yeah, well, and that's, even if you've done it once, if you, like I said earlier, if you re-rehearse it like you've done it 1,000 times, then, you might only sunk that one basket, one game winner in your whole life. But if you re-rehearse it a bunch of times, you feel like Michael Jordan or, LeBron James. But same thing getting on stage,
Yeah.
If you maybe get real nervous, you only been on stage once, and you did good once, but all the other times you did bad. Just remember that one time and re-rehearse it. Yeah,
because your brain doesn't know the difference, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's a form of self-hypnosis. So.
I love that. Dr. Jack Brown, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it, especially because I took a lot of your time. So thank you for that. And
Thank you. I'd love to come back. And if you ever want to go into any of these subtopics in more detail or.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That'd be great. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me on.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Take care of each other. Be kind. Love you.